Good morning, everybody. We're just going to give it a couple of seconds so that we can let our participants number go up before we make a formal start. I think the number is slowing down a little bit, so we will get started and hopefully we'll have a few more people join in the next couple of minutes. So welcome everybody to the second session of our virtual open day today. This session is a virtual Q&A session, and we're delighted to have as many of you join us as I can see in the participants list here, and joining us from lots of different parts of the world as well, which is very lovely to see. My name is Hannah Griffiths. I'm one of the recruitment managers for the Oxford MBA, and I'm delighted to be joined this morning by my colleague Gisela Collins, who's one of our senior advisors on the recruitment and admissions team. And this session is really designed to give you an opportunity to have any questions that you might have about the Oxford MBA answered. So those questions can cover a range of topics. We are very happy to take questions about the application process for the Oxford MBA, very happy to answer questions about the programme itself, to answer any questions that you might have about the wider Oxford experience, anything that you are keen to know about the programme or the application process. We are dedicating the entire section to your questions, so please do send them through to us via the Q&A function that you can see on the screen. Please continue to send them through as we move through the session, and we will do our very best to answer as many of them as we possibly can. We do ask that you use the Q&A function and not the chat if at all possible, so do feel free to use the chat to just say hello and to let us know where you are dialing in from in the world. That's always very lovely to see, and gives a good flavour to everybody else who's joined about the diversity that we have on these sessions. But in terms of sending your questions through, please do that via the Q&A button that you can see, and that's the easiest way for us to monitor and to make sure that we can get through as many of your questions as we possibly can. So I can see that some people have started to send through questions already. So Gisela, I'm going to hand over to you quickly. I know you've been keeping an eye on them. If there's a question that you are happy to grab to get started.
Yeah, what I'll do is I've noticed there is just one that's come through in the chat. So
okay,
if I read that one out and then we'll deal with that. And then if, the rest come through in the Q&A. So someone is asking if it's possible to speak to someone before commencing the application process. Yes, absolutely. We've got sort of dedicated teams within the admissions and recruitment team for different areas of the world. So if you'd like to email us at the email address that's on the screen, and it would be helpful if you could send your CV, your most recent CV or resume. We will then connect you with the relevant admissions team, and we can look at having a conversation with you prior to starting if there's some very sort of specific questions to your particular situation that you would like to ask. We'd be happy to help with that.
Great, thank you, Gisela. And there's a good question here from Ashish. I hope I've pronounced your name correctly, Ashish, in the Q&A, which is basically quite a general question, but I think which will be helpful for lots of people who have dialed in. So asking what makes an application strong for the Oxford MBA. So that's a good place to start. So I'm going to answer this looking at two different aspects, I guess. So the first is an application that is strong in terms of the different components and requirements that you have to meet in terms of the application for the Oxford MBA. And then I'll also say a little bit about what we're looking for in terms of like the profile of a candidate, or maybe what sets applications apart and makes them stand out a little bit. So in terms of the application requirements and what we would be looking for in a strong application, you have to have an undergraduate degree to apply for the Oxford MBA. That's a mandatory requirement. requirement, and we look for undergraduate degrees that are the equivalent of a GPA of 3.5 or a UK equivalent of a 2-1 or a first class degree. And then you also have to submit a Gmat or GRE score as part of your application as well. Guidance in terms of what would make a competitive application from that perspective is a Gmat score of 650 or higher, and a GRE which is the equivalent of a 3-2-1 combined, so a 160 in the verbal and a 161 in the quant. With both of those components, there's no mandatory requirement, so you don't have to have those particular scores, you don't have to have a 2-1 or a GPA of a 3.5, but obviously for a strong application, you do want to be targeting those areas. In particular with the Gmat, you'll have noticed, if you'll have done any research for the Oxford MBA, the median for our current cohort tends to be higher than that. That tends to be around 680 or 690. And so to ensure you're submitting a competitive application, you do want to be coming through with a Gmat or GRE that is as strong as possible. There is a minimum requirement in relation to work experience. So you do need to have a minimum of 2 years full-time work experience to apply. Again, the average for our cohort tends to be around 5 years, though there is a broader range represented across the class. Strong applications in terms of work experience will usually be able to demonstrate good progression across your career to date, maybe some examples of international exposure that you may have had, and any leadership opportunities that you might have had across your career to date as well. There is an English language requirement as well. I'm not going to go into detail about that right now because I'm absolutely certain that we're going to get some questions through about that as we move through the session, because we always do. So we'll touch on that a little bit later. And then you will also complete a number of other components, so an online assessment and a personal statement, and then there's also some sections of the applications where you'll write in more detail about your work experience and your post-MBA plans. I would say, to ensure that you are submitting a strong application outside of the areas that I've mentioned, you really want to try to give a sense of who you are through your application. So we are really keen at Oxford to know a little bit more about you through your application, what is unique about you, what you would be able to add to the cohort if you were to join us on the programme. So best advice, I think, in terms of submitting a strong application is just to be authentic, and in particular via the components of the application where you can really give us a sense of who you are and what you're all about. So the personal statement and the online assessment are two of those components where you have the opportunity to do that. Really focus on those sections and try to give the admissions committee a real sense of what you would be able to offer to the cohort if you were to join us on the MBA. So that's a bit of a rough overview, but I hope that answers the question that was asked.
Okay, I'm going to sort of do two together because they're quite quick. Someone has asked, does the University of Oxford accept the Toefl Home Edition? Yes, we do. So you can take your Toefl at home, absolutely. And then the next question is it necessary to send your Gmat score via mba.com before admission, or is uploading a scanned copy of the unofficial score report sufficient? So yes, when you apply for our MBA programme, excuse me, you do have to upload something. So your application actually won't be complete unless you upload either a screenshot or a scanned copy of your unofficial Gmat or GRE score. You don't have to make the official score available to us at the time of applying, but I would say it makes sense to, because if you are invited for interview, we would need to see the official score then. So in all honesty, it would just make sense to make it available to us as you're going through the application process. And then that saves you having to sort of frantically do it later on.
Great, thank you, Gisela. It's lovely to see so many people who are saying hi in the chat and letting us know where you're dialing in from. We're so glad to have so many of you from around the world joining us today, so thank you very much for that. Great question here from an anonymous attendee. So this person is asking about the disadvantage of applying in round 3 if you are an international applicant, which is a good question. So in terms of the profile of applications that we get on the Oxford MBA, MBA, the majority of our candidates are international. So we tend to have a small representation in our class annually of candidates who are from the UK. That tends to be maybe between kind of 5 to 8% annually in terms of representation in the cohort. So at each of the stage deadlines, the majority of the applications that we get for the programme are international applicants. And so there is no disadvantage to being an international applicant applying at any of the stage deadlines. There are some differences in terms of some of the stage deadlines when it comes to applying, and that it is worth flagging. And again, this is for everybody who's considering an application and isn't dependent on where you're applying from in the world. So for anybody who's considering applying in this cycle, we have 2 stage deadlines left. So we have our stage 3 deadline, which falls in January, and our stage 4 deadline, which usually falls around March, April time. Stage 3 is when we'll get the majority of our applications through on the Oxford MBA, and that's what we find annually. And so the admissions committee are mindful of this, and so we do tend to make the majority of our offers for places on programme at stage 3, and because we know that that's when we'll get the bulk of our applications through. Stage 4 is a much more competitive application stage. So at that stage in the cycle, we have made the majority of our place offers onto the programme, and it's also more competitive when it comes to things like scholarship and funding opportunities as well. So there is a much more limited amount of those available in stage 4. So if you are someone who's considering an application and you're choosing between stage 3 and stage 4, I would always recommend going in stage 3. There's still a number of places available on the programme, and there's still good opportunities available in relation to scholarships and funding. If you're somebody who is a little bit further out in the process and you're maybe thinking of applying further down the line, best advice I would always say is to apply in the earlier stages if you can. So if you are somebody who can target the stage 1 or stage 2 deadline, that's certainly recommended. It obviously just means that you're applying earlier in the process, and there's lots of opportunity in relation to scholarship and funding in those early stages. If you apply in stage 1, you're obviously in the first batch of people to be considered for a place on the programme as well, and so that gives you possibly a less competitive stage than if you apply further down the line. So best advice is to apply as early as possible. No disadvantage to applying in stage 3 if you are an international applicant, but if you're choosing between stage 3 and stage 4, my advice would be to go for stage 3 over stage 4. So I hope that's helpful.
Great, okay. We've got a question here from Lauren asking about the 1+1 programme. Will students have access to the MBA resources during their first year of study? And also, what happens if a student applies for the 1+1 programme but is only accepted into one school? So yes, absolutely, you do have access to the school during your MSc year. There will be some special events that happen just for 1+1 students during that first year, to sort of integrate you and give you some advice on what's available for you to use in terms of facilities at the school and the events that you can attend. In terms of what happens if you're only accepted into one programme, you do have the opportunity to then decide whether you just want to do 1 year. So for example, if you were accepted into the MBA but not the partnering MSc, we would then contact you and say, would you like to start the MBA this year? So you are able to do that, and it does work the other way around as well if you're accepted into your MSc but not accepted into the MBA programme. So as I say, you do have the option then to come straight away and just do 1 year of study rather than 2.
Great, thank you, Gisela. Really good question here, again from an anonymous attendee, asking a question about the personal statement on the application. So for those of you who aren't familiar, the personal statement asks you, tell us something that is not covered in your application which you would like the admissions committee to know about you, and you are asked to submit a 250-word answer to that question when you apply for the programme, and this person is asking for some advice on the best way to approach that question when you are applying. I would say, as I mentioned earlier on, so the personal statement and the online assessment are your 2 best opportunities in the application to really give the admissions committee a sense of who you are. So in terms of the personal statement, I would say the best thing to do is to avoid rehashing information that we can see in the other areas of your application. So sometimes candidates are tempted to maybe give a summary or an overview of their career to date. We can see that via your CV, and there's also a section where you can write in detail about your current role. So avoid temptation to repeat any information that we can see in other areas of the application, and really see it as a unique opportunity to tell the committee something about you that will give us a sense of what you can add to the cohort and what you would bring to the table if you were to join the Oxford MBA. People will approach it in different ways. Some candidates will choose to tell us about maybe a life experience that they have had that they feel has had a big impact or influence on them. Some people will choose to talk to us about an extracurricular or a hobby or interest that they've maybe had across their life to date that they feel adds a different layer to their skill set and has maybe given them some leadership opportunities that they haven't had in their career up to that point. Other candidates will use it maybe to be open and honest about a component of their application where they maybe think it's a bit weaker than some other aspects of the application, and so they'll use that personal statement to acknowledge that and maybe provide a little bit of background as to why that is, and then maybe some supplementary evidence for why they think they can make up that shortfall in the application. So people come at it in lots of different ways. I would say the key thing to focus on is making sure that you're telling us something that we can't see in any other aspect of the application, and that will give us a sense of who you are and what you can add, contribute to the cohort if you were to join us. So I hope that's helpful. Really good question.
Okay, so Hannah has asked, if I apply with a certain Gmat score and then decide to take another test before the interview decisions are out, will the updated score be considered? Yes, it will. We wouldn't look for it automatically, so we would need you to let us know when you have taken the test and what your new score is. And also, you know, as I say, wise to make the official score available to us to view as well, so that we can maybe access that at the same time. But certainly we can add that to your application and let the admissions committee be aware so that they can take that new score into consideration.
Great, thank you, Gisela. I had a good question there that I've momentarily lost. I found it again. There we go. So this is a question from Kaija, I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. Apologies if I haven't. So this is a question about if you are offered a place onto the programme, but you're not successful in securing a scholarship and you're unable to finance the studies yourself, what happens in that case? Which is a really good question, because I know that there'll be lots of people dialed in who will be interested in knowing more about scholarship and funding opportunities in terms of maybe making an MBA viable for them. And there are lots of scholarship opportunities available on the Oxford MBA, and there's a dedicated page on our website with lots of information about them. Research is key when it comes to scholarship opportunities, so I would really recommend for anybody who's considering an application and who is keen to secure a scholarship to help fund their MBA, do a lot of research in advance, and that page on our website is a great place to start. However, I would say, and it's good to make people aware of this as well, a lot of the scholarships that we offer are partial scholarships. There are some that are fully funded places on the MBA, but the majority are partial awards. And so candidates are then expected to fund the remainder of their tuition on the MBA themselves. And I would say if you were in a position where you would be completely dependent on receiving a full scholarship to fund your MBA, you would possibly maybe want to wait until you are at a different point when you maybe have some other funding opportunities to support your application. So unfortunately, we're not in a position at the business school, if we admit you and you're not successful in securing a scholarship, that we can help you secure funding in another way. And there are obviously a number of external lenders and opportunities that you may be able to access in your home country. Again, there's some information about those on our website. But I do think it's important to come into the application process optimistic about the possibility of securing a scholarship, absolutely, but also having done some research and making sure that you have looked into the other funding options that are available to you if you are keen to come onto the MBA, but you weren't successful in securing one of those scholarship awards. So I hope that's helpful.
Okay, I'm going to attempt to cover the English language question and the waivers in a clear and understandable way, because I know it's the rules have changed this year, so it's a little bit confusing. So we have from an anonymous attendee asking about uploading proof for a medium of communication for English. So basically, to have a language test waiver, you need to have studied at degree level for 9 months or longer, completed that degree where the medium of instruction throughout was English, and it has to have been within the last 2 years. So that has been the change this year, so that you can only apply for an academic waiver if you've graduated within the last 2 years. Now, obviously, that doesn't work for a lot of our applicants. So we do also have the opportunity to apply for what we call a professional waiver. So this means that if you use English every day at work as your spoken working language, then you can apply for a professional language test waiver. Now, you can either get a letter from your work, you know, on a headed paper just to say that English is the working medium at your workplace, or you can write it yourself. You know, it doesn't have to be a formal letter. It doesn't have to be long, it can be very brief. All we're looking for is you to let us know how you use the 4 elements of the English language test at work. So reading, writing, speaking, listening. You literally just need to say, I use all of these elements every day at work in my job. What I think also the person might be asking here is there has been a little bit of an issue with our application form where if you put down yes for one or either of these, the academic waiver or the professional waiver, it won't let you go forward until you upload something in the other. So basically, if it is the case that you're applying for an academic waiver, but it's not letting you go forward until you also put something in the professional waiver, please just upload the document again. So, you know, be it your transcripts or your letter, you know, asking for a professional waiver. If you've got any concerns about that at all, please just reach out to the admissions team. I know that we've had a few people asking about it, so we can just clarify that for you. So yes, as I say, academic waiver is graduating within the last 2 years where the medium of instruction is English. Otherwise, you can apply for a professional waiver. Unfortunately, if you don't use English every day at work, then you will have to take an English language test. So we do accept the Toefl, the IELTS and the Cambridge test. And for the Toefl and IELTS, we do accept the home editions of those. So if it is the case that you're currently in lockdown and your test centres are closed, then you can take those tests at home and we will accept those scores.
Great, thank you, Gisela. Right, really good question here from Liam. Thank you for your question. So Liam's asking if we can provide a bit of an overview of the programme structure of the Oxford MBA, and is particularly interested in knowing a bit about, I guess, how the programme runs across the 12 months and that you would be with us in Oxford. So I'm gonna speak to this at quite a high level. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail because we could probably fill the remainder of the webinar with giving information about the programme. And there is a lot of useful information about this on our website. And if you have any more in-depth questions, Liam, after today, do feel free to reach out to our team and we'll be happy to answer them. But for those of you who aren't familiar with the structure of the programme, so the Oxford MBA is a 1-year programme. So it's 12 months, so runs from September to September annually. The first 2 weeks of the programme are what we call launch. So with essentially you'll spend 2 weeks on the campus here in Oxford doing a range of different activities and events, getting to know the other members of the class, which at Oxford is around 320 people every year, an incredibly diverse cohort from a nationality perspective. So with this year's class, we have 72 different nationalities represented across our cohort. So lots of networking opportunities and the chance to get to know the people who you'll be spending the next year with in those 2 weeks, and obviously to get to know important people across the school as well in terms of our programme team and faculty members, etc., and getting you ready and prepared to make a start on the programme. So the first semester then on the Oxford MBA is when you'll focus on the core courses, which are the mandatory elements of the programme that all of our students will complete. There are 9 core courses altogether at Oxford, and they run through that first semester and into the second semester. They cover all of the topics that you would probably anticipate finding on any MBA programme, so things like finance, accounting, marketing. The 9th core course that we added last year is still relatively new to us at Oxford, which is a core course called Capitalism in Debate. Obviously at Oxford, and in terms of an MBA, we want to make sure that the academic content is always relevant, and so that's being reviewed and updated all the time, and the addition of that core course is a good example of that. As you move then through your second semester on the MBA, you'll complete those core courses, and that's also when the 2 mandatory projects that you complete on the Oxford MBA are launched as well. So those 2 projects are the Entrepreneurship Project that all of our students will do, and the Go-To Project, which I hope some of you are familiar with already if you've been researching the Oxford MBA. The Entrepreneurship Project involves you working in a small team, so 4 to 5 MBA students, self-selected teams, whereby essentially you'll come up with an idea for a business, build a business plan, and ultimately pitch the idea to a panel of potential investors. A very popular component of the programme with students who are keen to pursue entrepreneurship out the other side of the MBA. We do attract a lot of those students at Oxford. We have a big focus on entrepreneurship on the programme, and a lot of support available for entrepreneurs as well. We also have a large number of alumni who go on to launch businesses that were projects that they started via the Entrepreneurship Project as well, which is also very exciting. Go-To is a project that is run in conjunction with the Scholl Centre for Social Entrepreneurship. Again, will involve you working in a small team, 4 to 5 MBA students with a designated tutor. You'll be given a different topic annually for Go-To, and the idea is that it is a crisis or a world scale issue that you will be working with your teammates to come up with a business solution to tackle. Again, lots of information available on our website. Previous Go-To topics have been things like climate change, the future of energy, big data, and things like that. A really challenging process for students to go through, but really rewarding as well. And we will end with you pitching your project idea, presenting it to the rest of your cohort and a number of key stakeholders as well. As you move into the 3rd semester on the MBA, then that's when the elective portion really comes into play. The elective is, I guess, your opportunity to really tailor, personalize the program to what you are looking to get out of your MBA experience. A really broad range of elective options available. You'll choose a minimum of 7 that you'll complete across your time on the MBA. You can be very focused in terms of your elective choices. So if you're very keen to move into a particular area out the other side of the MBA, you might want to choose a suite of electives that are focused on those areas. Other students see it as an opportunity to really broaden their horizons, gain some different perspectives, and will choose more of a mixed bag in terms of elective options. Those electives also include some international electives options, so we run 3 international electives on the Oxford MBA annually, 1 to South Africa, 1 to New York, and a fintech focus elective that takes place in London every year. And then moving into the summer semester on the Oxford MBA, you have a number of different choices for what you can do at that point. So you can stay with us in Oxford and you can do a couple of additional electives at that point. You can also do an internship for credit in the summer semester, a popular option with candidates who who are looking maybe to make a career pivot and are looking to gain some hands-on experience in a particular organisation with a view to being able to make that pivot more easily. You can also do a strategic consultancy project in that final semester as well. Again, a popular option with students who are maybe looking to move into consulting after the MBA and who are looking to gain kind of some practical hands-on experience in doing some consultancy work at that point as well. So that's a very broad overview of how the year works and how the programme is structured. As I said, lots of information available on our website, and Liam, do reach out to us if you want any kind of more specific information about any particular components.
Okay, so we have a question from an anonymous attendee, just asking, how important is it to have an international work experience sort of within your profile, and does it need to be with a global firm, or can your profile be strong with just domestic market work experience? Yes, it absolutely can. I mean, our admissions committee genuinely do look at every application on a case-by-case basis. We have a holistic process, so we are looking at your whole application. You know, obviously having international exposure is quite nice, but it isn't necessary in every single application. If you're showing us strong work experience, a great career progression, even if it is within a domestic market, you've got a solid and well thought out post-MBA career plan, and you're demonstrating to us what qualities you're looking for from the MBA, you know, and how that's going to help you in your post-MBA career goal, then absolutely your application is going to be just as strong, if not stronger, than somebody with some international experience.
Great, thank you, Gisela. I had one, yes, question here from Pranav, and thank you, Pranav, for your question. Really quick one. So Pranav has asked which parts of the application could be used to explain a weakness in your profile. I think we touched on this earlier on, but I would say the personal statement is probably the best component of the application to acknowledge any weakness that you have identified in your application, and provide maybe some background to it to the committee, and then maybe also say a little bit about how you feel you make up for any shortfall in the application that way. I can see that there's a few questions coming through as well about the points at which you apply in a stage deadline. So just to touch on that quickly, people are kind of asking if you apply earlier in stage 3 or stage 4 rather than close to the deadline, does that benefit you in any way? The answer is no. So whether you apply, you know, 3 weeks before the actual application deadline or on the day of the application deadline itself, our team won't begin processing applications until we have actually reached the deadline. And you'll see on our website that there is, you know, specific dates that are marked in terms of when you'll find out the outcome, if you've been offered an interview, when that interview process will take place, etc. So there's no real advantage in terms of getting your application in 3 weeks before the deadline versus on the day of the deadline itself. So just to clear that up, I can see there was a couple of questions about that.
Okay, so Ashish has asked, what happens if there is a lockdown and students can't travel to their MBA? Says, I understand the answer may depend on the situation that's unfolding at the moment, but would just like to get some idea in these uncertain times. So yes, absolutely, that has been a scenario, as you can imagine, over the last sort of 18 months or so. We are teaching face-to-face at the school at the moment. When we need to, we're observing social distancing and, you know, mask wearing, etc. But for the students who can't travel, there is the option to join the sessions and the classes online. You would do this term by term so that we can keep track of the situation as it evolves. And basically, it's a process with the wider university where you would apply for a dispensation not to be there in person for that term. So our content is available, you know, what we call asynchronous teaching. So it is available sort of online and in person, depending what it is you want to do, or are able to do, should I say.
Thank you, Gisela. Really good question here from Olatan. Thank you for the question. So Olatan has asked how the admissions team evaluate a candidate's short-term career goal when they apply for the MBA, which is a really good question. So the career plan component of the application, so the section where you're asked to write about your post-MBA plans, is a really important component of the application, and is definitely worth spending quite a bit of time on when you are preparing your application. I would say there's a few things that the committee really look for here. So one thing that they are very keen to see is that a candidate has spent some time in advance of the application reflecting on their career to date, so that you have a good idea of the skill set, the knowledge that you've been able to build across your career to date. You are also aware of maybe some gaps that you have that you're looking for the MBA to fill, some skills that maybe you need to develop, and how these two things combined, so your experience to date, what you're going to gain from the MBA, are going to help to get you to where you're looking to go out the other side of the MBA. With a view then to talking about the role that you are keen to secure out the other side of the MBA, the admissions committee really like to see that you're well researched in relation to this. So if you are somebody who is maybe looking to do the MBA with a view to making a pivot in your career, so maybe moving into a different sector, maybe changing function, maybe changing geography, sometimes two or three of those things combined in terms of an application, you really want to demonstrate to the committee that you have a good understanding of the sector, role, geography that you're looking to move into. You've done a good level of research around recruitment for those roles, so you have a good understanding of, you know, the companies that you're targeting, how they recruit, who they are looking for. You've maybe already started to do some networking in those organizations or within the sector that you're looking to move into. So whether that's talking to alumni who have done an MBA and who have then gone on to work in those spaces, or it's whether you've just started to have conversations with people within the organizations that you're targeting, again, to gain a better understanding of the types of candidates that they look to recruit, what their recruitment process is like. The admissions committee really wants to see that you have done a good level of research around that. And so strength in those three areas can lead to a really strong post-MBA plan section of your application. The one thing that I think is a bit of a red flag in relation to post-MBA plans in an application is if a candidate gives the impression through that section that they feel that doing the MBA alone is going to be enough for them to secure the role that they're looking for out the other side. You know, that we obviously have a dedicated career development centre here at the business school, and they are very much here to support candidates in terms of the roles that they are looking to get out the other side of the MBA, but they are not recruitment consultants. They don't place you in those roles just once you're here with us on the MBA. It's very much a two-way street with MBA students. And so the committee are really looking to see that you are somebody who knows what you need to do in order to secure one of the roles that you're looking for. And then obviously the school, the programme and our careers team will do their very best to support you in that. So showing a very good level of self-reflection, research, knowledge of your skill set, knowledge of your gaps, and we'll look at all of those things when we're evaluating your short-term career plan in relation to your profile. So I hope that helps.
Okay, I'll just add to that because somebody has asked also, how long would you expect the post-MBA plans to be? It's about finding a fine balance there of giving us a certain level of information, but not getting completely bogged down in detail, because as you can imagine, the admission committee don't have time to read, you know, pages and pages and pages of detail on every single application. So I think it's very much about finding the balance between not just giving brief bullet points, but giving us a little bit more detail there, giving us your thought process, but not getting too wordy and just giving pages and pages and pages. I would say the sweet spot tends to be about 3 to 4 pages for that section once you finish writing. So yes, you know, it genuinely is about kind of trying to hone that, spend a bit of time on it, find the balance so that you feel you're confident, you're being clear and you're giving us enough detail, but you're not being too brief.
Really great question to follow up on that. Thank you to whoever sent that in. A good question here, and I can see that there are a few that are similar around scholarship applications and what people can do to submit a strong scholarship application when applying for the MBA. So very similar to how your MBA application will be reviewed. When you are being considered for scholarships, the committee will take a very similar approach, and that is that they will look at your application holistically. So I should say, first of all, I'm answering this in relation to the scholarships that we look after here at the business school. So the ones where there's no additional element of application attached, and if you're admitted to the programme, you're automatically considered for some of these scholarship awards. So for those ones, the committee will review your application holistically. So they will look at all of the different components of your application, and they will make decisions on who to award those scholarships to based on the strength of your MBA application. Things that will certainly help in that case are a strong academic profile. So if you are somebody who has applied and you have a very competitive Gmat score, you have a competitive undergraduate degree to support that, you maybe have some other academic degrees as well, be they masters or you've completed CFA, those kind of things. Those will all give you a very strong base in terms of your academic profile when being considered for scholarships. But the committee will also look at things like your work experience to date, what it is that you've done across your career so far. They will look at your career plan and, you know, as I said, how well researched that is, how much work you're doing already to make sure that you're somebody who can secure one of those roles out the other side. They will look at your interview notes. So at that point, you'll have been admitted to the programme, and the person who has interviewed you will have provided some good feedback following their conversation with you. So they will look at all of those things when making a decision on who to make those awards to. So you're really looking at making sure that you feel your application for the MBA is at its absolute strongest at the point you come to apply, to give yourself a really good opportunity to be considered for those scholarship awards. For some of the scholarships where there is an additional element of application attached, so ones like the Scholl Scholarship and the Laidlaw Scholarships, Pershing Square, if you're applying for the 1+1. For those awards, it's obviously slightly different. There's an additional element of application, which is usually writing an essay to support your application for that scholarship. And some of those external organisations will be looking for different things in candidates who they're making those awards to. So, for example, with Pershing Square, I know that the foundation are very focused on finding future leaders who are looking to drive change across their careers in the future. So you would be really looking to flag up kind of leadership opportunities and motivation to pursue kind of impact or drive change and drive initiatives across your career. So again, as I said earlier, it's worth doing a good level of research if you are considering applying for any of those awards to make sure that you fit the right profile. But for the scholarships we manage here at the business school, you really are just looking to submit an MBA application that is strong all around, with all of the different components being taken into consideration.
Okay, so we have somebody asking, is it okay to submit the analytical writing section of the Gmat or GRE test after? Because often that isn't scored on the same day as you take the test. So yes, absolutely. Basically just fill out the scores that you have got, and as I say, upload either a screenshot or a scanned copy of your test taker score sheet. And in fact, the best thing to do is, as I said earlier, is make the official score available to us at that time. You know, obviously when you take the test, you can make it available to 5 institutions for free. You know, choose us as one of those 5. That means we can access it. So when the admissions team are processing your application, when they then access your official score, we will then be able to see the analytical writing side of it. So that's probably the easiest way to go about that.
Great, thank you, Gisela. Another quick one that I can take here about the GRE and the Gmat. So somebody who's asked if those are weighed equally in terms of an application. Yes, so we have no preference for one over the other. So best advice when it comes to those is just to choose the test that you feel suits you best, gives you the best opportunity to get a strong score that you can submit with. So we have no preference either way in terms of which test that you take and submit with. We still tend to find that a higher percentage of people will submit applications with the Gmat, though we have seen growth in terms of GRE numbers across the past few years. I think historically maybe the Gmat is just the test that people associate with MBA applications, which is why a lot of candidates still tend to lean towards that. But we are absolutely happy to look at the GRE in the same light as the Gmat, so absolutely no preference for one over the other on our end. And there was another question, yes, another good question here from Akshay, which is in relation to the COVID situation. I know it's impossible to do one of these sessions these days without touching on COVID a little bit, and in particular asking about students having the opportunity to participate in kind of global business treks and things like that currently. I would say actually for this year's class, those things are still under review. So obviously there's two different components of the MBA where international travel is under consideration. So one is the international electives that I mentioned that we do earlier. I know that conversations are still ongoing for our current cohort about whether or not those international electives will take place this year. Our appetite at the business school is obviously to do our very best to give students the opportunity to participate in those electives. And so whether that means maybe pushing them to a different point in the academic year where there's more of a possibility for them to happen, and those are things that we're looking at the moment to see if we will be able to offer those to students this year. The treks are obviously slightly different because they're not actually a component of the curriculum on the Oxford MBA, though they are something that we know MBA students will work closely with our Career Development Centre on, and will usually happen annually. As things stand, I would think in the coming months it's unlikely that we will be having any student treks taking place. Again, you know, and I think we all feel like this in light of the past couple of years, it's obviously a very fluid situation. So if there's the possibility that maybe later in the year, closer to the summertime, that the students may be able to organise and participate in some treks in a way that is safe and that the school is happy to sanction, then I'm sure the appetite will be there to support that. But as things stand, no firm decisions have been made either way in terms of treks or the international electives here at the school.
Okay, so another anonymous person asking to give more information of what is required of their referees. Is it a written statement? Do they fill out a web form? What should you tell your referee to expect? How can you best prepare them? So basically, you know, we do advise talking to your referee beforehand and letting them know that you're applying, because obviously there is a deadline and a fixed deadline for when they would need to get the reference in. And if your application is lacking its references, then it's not going to get considered in that particular application stage. So do, you know, in the first instance, let them know that they need to sort of get it in a timely manner by the deadline date. But basically, when you put in their email address, they will then get an email that comes through to them that has a unique link in it. And when they click on that, it gives them some more information about what we're looking for. So basically, we are looking for them to rank you on some competencies. So they would do that and then also upload a letter of recommendation. But we do give them some pointers on what it is that we're looking for from that letter of recommendation. So basically, you know, things you would probably expect, how long they've worked with you, you know, to your strengths, your weaknesses, how you work in a team. Those kind of things are what we're looking for from their letter of recommendation. And once they've filled that out, they can upload it to via this link to your application, and it gets attached to your application that way.
Great, thank you, Gisela. A good question here from somebody who is asking what the school culture is like, which again is difficult to answer, I guess, and I'm sure actually maybe different members of our team would answer this differently. So I'll just give some of my perspectives. So I mentioned already that the MBA program and the business school as a whole really is incredibly diverse. So if you're joining us on the Oxford MBA, you will be joining an incredibly international cohort. Our current class is 92% international, as I said, and we've got 72 different nationalities represented across the class. But it's also an incredibly diverse cohort from a diversity of thought perspective, which is something that's really important to us at Oxford when we're putting the cohort together. So we try to have as broad a range of professional experiences as possible represented across our class. We feel that that just really lends itself well to having a collaborative community and to giving our students the opportunity to learn as much as possible from their peers on the programme as they will from the faculty, the research, the curriculum, etc. when you're on the Oxford MBA. So incredibly diverse in those two regards. Also great diversity at Oxford in terms of gender balance. I'm sure that we have some women who are dialed in to join us today. That's a big focus that we have here at Oxford, and we're working all the time to move as close as possible or to achieve gender parity on the Oxford MBA. And we would love to have a class that was a 50-50 split of men and women on the programme. And so you will be joining a cohort that has a really good percentage of female representation on it as well. And then I would say there's definitely quite a good sense of community on the Oxford MBA. As I said, the programme really lends itself to working collaboratively. I mentioned earlier some of the projects that you'll work on, so lots of opportunity to work in smaller groups, lots of opportunity to build relationships, get to know other people across the cohort via different elective options, and also the range of co-curriculars that you can get involved in. And in general, I would say that it's quite a supportive community on the MBA as well, which I think is something that sometimes surprises students when they join the programme. I think even if they're not told this in advance, I think some people come onto the MBA maybe anticipating that it will be quite competitive, that there'll be lots of people who are competing for similar job roles, and so as a result, people will be maybe quite guarded with their work, etc. And that's really not the case here at Oxford. And again, I think that's partly due to how the programme is designed. It really is a supportive, collaborative school community, and those are some of the traits that we are looking for in candidates when we are putting the class together as well. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a sense of what it would be like if you were to join us here at the school.
Okay, so Sneha has asked, along with defining my current role, is my previous professional experience expected to be detailed, especially for the element of challenges and achievements? Yes, absolutely, you can if you want to. It is quite useful to see that career progression, and absolutely, if you feel that it's very relevant to the person you are today, where you are now in your career, in your life, that some of the sort of challenges or achievements that you've had in previous roles have really defined you, then yes, please do mention them in that section on your work experience on the application form.
Right, thank you, Gisela. Another question here regarding referees. So somebody who's just asking who would be a strong referee, which is a good question. So lots of candidates, when they're considering who to approach to be references, think that they should maybe have a balance of academic and professional referees when they're applying for the programme. And so they'll be considering maybe having one of each when they're submitting their application, or often when candidates are considering two professional referees, they're thinking of people who are, very senior within their organizations, maybe who they think will hold a bit more gravitas in terms of the reference that they're providing. I would say for our team and for the admissions committee, best advice when it comes to choosing your referees is to choose two people who know you really well, who can write about you with a good level of detail, who know what it's like to work with you, who know where your skills lay, and who can give a good account, and who will really advocate for you. Two people who will support your application for the MBA and will give a good description of what you're like to work with and what you might add to the cohort if you were to join us on the MBA. So I would say think less about kind of who they are, how senior they are, whether they're academic or professional, and just really consider how well do these two people know me? Can they write about me with a good level of detail? Can they share strong insights into what I'm like to work with, and make your choices with those criteria in mind, rather than specifically who they are within your organization or within an academic institution.
Okay, so Sanjita is asking, with the online assessment, is it timed, and how lengthy will these questions be? So yes, it is timed. You are up against the clock. It is basically seeing how you deal with that little bit of pressure. Basically what happens is when you go into that system, you can create a profile in a test environment, and you can practice as much as you like to get used to the system, to get used to the type of questions, and also get used to just talking to yourself live, basically. But when you decide to go and record live, I'm afraid you can't go back to the test system. You have to go forward. And basically, the question is read out in a little video. It also appears as text on the screen, and you will get 2 minutes to prepare for the first 2 questions, and then you speak for 1.5 minutes. For the third question, you also get 2 minutes to prepare, but you speak for 1 minute. So those first 2 questions, yes, the sort of motivational questions, everybody does get asked the same. The competency question is just from a random bank, so it can be anything, but it tends to be the sort of thing you would expect to get asked in an interview scenario. So you're in a team environment, this happens, how did you deal with it? And then finally, there is one written answer as well. Again, you have a 2-minute prompt to think about your answer, and then you get 5 minutes where you're able to sort of write as much as you can within that time. No sort of right or wrong answers to that. So it's not trying to trick you or trip you up or anything like that. It's just an added element to the application form, gives us a bit of an idea of you as a person, and as I say, how you react under a little bit of pressure.
Great, thank you, Gisela. I can see we're almost at the end of the session. There's just one question here that I can see that I can answer very quickly, which again is in relation to references. So somebody asking, if you are an entrepreneur, is it okay to provide references from previous employers or supervisors, or does it have to be from someone you're working with currently? No, absolutely fine to submit references from previous employers or supervisors if you feel that that would be more beneficial and would support your application in a stronger way. So that's absolutely fine. Doesn't necessarily have to be somebody who you're working with currently in terms of providing your reference. So thank you very much for that. I don't know, Giza, if you can see any that we could answer very quickly before we finish. Somebody who's asking here when the latest employment report comes out, it should be available on our website. So the most recent one I think was only released, I want to say probably about 2 months ago. And so you should be able to find that on our website. There is always a delay with new ones being published, because obviously we are waiting for people to have completed the MBA for a period of time and to have secured their job roles, etc., before we'll start to gather all of that data to produce the report. So there won't be another new one, I would think, for almost probably this time next year, or kind of September, October time next year. So the most relevant, most recent one should be available on our website. Thank you very much, everybody, for sending in questions. I'm sorry that we didn't get through all of them, but we're very grateful to all of you for your engagement and for sending through such great questions. We have 2 more sessions on our virtual open day today, which we hope that you'll be able to join us for. One of those is a session with 2 members from our Career Development Centre. So for any of you who are dialed in who would like more information about how the Career Development Centre works, the support that's available for students on the MBA in relation to careers, I really encourage you to join that session. I think it starts in about half an hour's time. And then we have a wonderful student panel later this afternoon as well. So for any of you who are keen to hear from some of our current students on the Oxford MBA, they'll be sharing their insights in terms of why they decided to apply to Oxford, and how they've been finding the programme and the wider Oxford experience since they got here in September. So do join us for that as well. Any outstanding questions that you have after today, our email address is on the screen, and do please feel free to reach out to our team. We're very happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you once again for your time, and to my colleague Gisela for supporting and answering so many questions today as well. And we'll look forward to hopefully having some more of you join us later this afternoon.